What would you do if the whole world laughed at your dream? Would you give up, or would you keep fighting? Today, I will tell you the story of a boy who failed again and again, but his refusal to quit turned him into a true champion. This is not just his story, it is a lesson for all of us. If this story inspired you, remember, life will knock you down, but you must never give up. For more powerful motivational stories like this, subscribe to our channel and join our journey of strength, courage, and success. In a small town surrounded by green fields and dusty roads lived a boy named Ethan. His world was simple but full of struggles. His family was poor. His father worked as a daily laborer at construction sites, earning just enough to buy food for the day. His mother spent hours sewing clothes for neighbors, her fingers often bleeding from the sharp needles. They lived in a small wooden house with a leaking roof, and every time it rained the family had to place buckets everywhere to stop the water from flooding their home. For many children, childhood was a time of games, fun, and laughter. But for Ethan, it was a time of survival. He wore torn clothes, his shoes had holes, and sometimes he even went to school barefoot. Yet, inside his heart, he carried a dream that seemed impossible to others. He wanted to become an athlete. He wanted to run, not just in his town, but on big tracks, in front of the world. He dreamed of representing his country one day, though he had never even seen a real stadium in his life. From the very beginning, people doubted him. Ethan was not strong. He was thin, weak, and often sick. Whenever he spoke about running, his classmates laughed. "Look at you," they mocked. "You can hardly carry your school bag. How will you ever become a runner?" The words hurt, but Ethan never answered back with anger. Instead, he quietly kept his dream alive inside his heart. He knew that dreams were not for showing off, dreams were for working on. Every morning, before the sun even rose, Ethan would wake up and step outside. The air was cold, the streets were muddy, and sometimes the fog was so thick that he could hardly see in front of him. But he ran. He ran barefoot because his family could not afford running shoes. His feet often bled when sharp stones or broken glass cut him, but he never stopped. He believed that every step, every drop of sweat, was bringing him closer to his dream. His mother often watched from the small window of their house. She saw her son running while the rest of the world slept. Tears filled her eyes. She knew life was cruel to him, but she also knew his spirit was something special. Quietly, she prayed every morning, hoping that one day her son's determination would be rewarded. Ethan's first race came when he was just 12 years old. It was a small competition organized by the local school. Students gathered on the field, the crowd cheered, and for the first time Ethan felt what it meant to run with others. But when the race began, he was left far behind. He finished last. The crowd clapped for the winner, but nobody noticed the thin boy breathing heavily at the back. That night Ethan sat alone outside his house, staring at the stars. He felt broken. He thought maybe everyone was right, maybe he was not meant to run. But then he remembered something his father once told him after a long day of hard work: winners are not the ones who never fail. Winners are the ones who never quit. Those words became Ethan's fire. From that day, he promised himself that he would never give up, no matter how many times he lost. Days turned into weeks, weeks turned into months. Ethan kept running. Sometimes he ran in the scorching heat, sometimes in heavy rain. Sometimes he trained on an empty stomach because there was no food at home. His friends stopped supporting him. Even teachers told him to focus on studies and forget about running. But Ethan's heart did not listen. His legs kept moving, his spirit kept fighting. At school races, he lost again and again. Each time he failed, the laughter grew louder. "Ethan, you should quit," people told him. "Running is not for you." But Ethan knew that every loss was teaching him something. He studied the winners. He observed how they moved, how they breathed, how they saved their energy. He used every mistake as a lesson. One evening, after another race where he came second last, Ethan's mother found him sitting quietly, his head down. She placed her hand on his shoulder and said softly, "Son, don't let the world decide your future. The world only sees what you are now, but you know what you can become. Keep running. Your time will come. Those words gave Ethan new energy. The next morning he tied his worn-out shoes with broken laces and began to run again. He ran through fields, along rivers, and on the empty roads. Sometimes stray dogs chased him, or sometimes people mocked him, but he kept running. Years went by. Ethan's body grew stronger. His thin frame became filled with muscle, his weak lungs became powerful, and his tired legs became fast. He still had not won a big race, but small victories started coming his way. Sometimes he finished second, sometimes third. Every little improvement reminded him that he was moving forward. One day, the town announced a district-level competition. Athletes from different places were coming to participate. It was bigger than anything Ethan had ever imagined. People told him not to waste his time. "You are not ready for this," they said. "Those runners are professionals. You cannot compete with them." But Ethan smiled. He remembered his father's words. He remembered his mother's prayers. And most importantly, he remembered every painful morning, every barefoot run, every drop of blood and sweat. He decided to enter the race, not to prove anything to others, but to prove to himself that he would never give up. The night before the race, Ethan could not sleep. His heart beat fast, his mind filled with memories of every failure. He knew the challenge ahead was bigger than anything he had faced before. But deep inside, he also knew that giving up was not an option. And so, with determination burning in his eyes, Ethan prepared himself for the race that could change his life forever. The morning of the district race finally arrived. Ethan woke up before dawn, his heart pounding with nervous excitement. The sky was still dark, but he could already hear the faint buzz of the town preparing for the event. For many, it was just another race. For Ethan, it was the test of his entire life. He stood in front of the cracked mirror in his small wooden house. His running shoes were old and worn out, with the soles nearly gone. His clothes were simple, nothing like the professional athletes who would arrive in shiny tracksuits. For a moment, doubt tried to creep into his heart. What if I lose again? What if everyone laughs? But then he looked at his reflection and whispered to himself, "I did not come this far to quit. Today is not about them. Today is about me, about proving that I will never give up." His mother tied a small red thread around his wrist before he left. "This is not magic," she said with a smile, "but let it remind you that no matter where you run, my prayers are always with you." When Ethan reached the district stadium, his eyes widened. It was the first time he had seen such a big track. Hundreds of people filled the seats, cheering loudly. The other athletes looked strong, tall, and confident. They wore expensive shoes, branded uniforms, and carried water bottles with coaches beside them. Compared to them, Ethan looked like a nobody. Some of the runners even laughed when they saw him. "Look at this boy," one whispered. "He doesn't even belong here." But Ethan ignored them. He walked quietly to the starting line, his heart steady and his mind focused. The whistle blew. The race began. At first, Ethan was slow. His legs felt heavy, his lungs burned. The other runners surged ahead, their powerful strides eating up the track. For a moment, it felt like all his fears were coming true. He was falling behind, just like in every other race before. But then something changed. He remembered the muddy streets where he had trained. He remembered running barefoot until his feet bled. He remembered every morning when the world slept, but he was awake, chasing his dream. He remembered the laughter, the insults, the loneliness. And he remembered the words his father had told him, "The winners are not the ones who never fail. Winners are the ones who never quit." Suddenly, the fire lit inside him. His breathing steadied. His legs moved faster. His arms pumped with strength. One by one, Ethan began to pass the other runners. The crowd started to notice. At first, they whispered. Then they shouted. Cheers filled the stadium. By the final lap, Ethan was no longer at the back. He was at the front, side by side with the strongest runner of the district. The boy beside him smirked, confident that Ethan would soon fall behind. But Ethan had something more powerful than muscles or fancy shoes. He had pain, he had hunger, and he had years of silent struggle turned into determination. With one last burst of energy, Ethan pushed forward. His vision blurred, his body screamed in pain, but he refused to stop. He crossed the finish line fast. For a moment, a silence filled the stadium. Nobody could believe it. The thin boy, the one everyone laughed at, had just beaten the best. Then, suddenly, the crowd exploded with cheers. People stood up, clapping, shouting his name. Ethan fell to his knees, the tears streaming down his face. Not because he won, but because he proved to himself that never giving up was his greatest power. His mother rushed onto the track, hugging him tightly. "You did it, my son," she whispered, her voice trembling with joy. "I always knew you could." From that day, Ethan's life began to change. Newspapers wrote about him. People in the town who once mocked him now looked at him with admiration. Coaches invited him to train at bigger facilities. His journey was far from over, but for the first time, the world recognized his determination. Years later, Ethan went on to represent his country at national and international competitions. Each time he stood on the track, he carried not just his own dream but the hope of every child who had ever been told, "You cannot." He ran not only with his legs but with his heart, with the memory of every obstacle he had overcome. Whenever reporters asked him the secret of his success, he always gave the same answer: "I failed more times than I can count. But I never gave up. That is the only reason I stand here today." Moral of the story: life will test you. People will doubt you. Failures will come again and again. But true strength is not in never falling, it is in getting back up every time you fall. The real power of success lies in never giving up.